kicking us in?
Am I?
Yeah.
Welcome
We're
back
rolling. Yeah.
to the Deconstruction Zone.
This is so professional.
Yeah. What's going on, you guys? What's the scuttlebutt? What's the vibe?
The scuttlebutt is we just set up a new room.
We
and-
did, actually.
And we succeeded at recording it.
So
I think this took an hour. What you're looking at?
Sweaty now.
is this the deconstruction zone? Is that what have we entered?
Is
the
this
zone?
zone the Deconstruction Zone?
It felt pretty construction-y.
Yeah.
That's true. We had to
We did
construct.
construct it.
well, Sadie's in like her construction worker jumpsuit.
I am. Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
my.
Your
I came
cosplay.
right from
Really
the
came dressed for the
mechanic
occasion.
from the garage.
I have an opening question for us.
Oh,
Here we
banger.
go. All right.
And I don't know that it'll have any conversation, but I want to know your thoughts on this.
I can
Big-
almost
big
guarantee a
business
conversation.
Danny. Here we go.
So I had a dream. Do you guys think like dreams matter? Are you like those people like
Yeah.
dreams?
No,
meetings?
my wife is
Yes.
my wife is all about dreams.
even a
Tells me every day about her dreams. I don't care.
Well, I don't. Know.
I never remember my dreams.
I don't know the last
So.
time I remembered a dream.
Yeah.
Okay. So I generally think dreams, not to be necessarily prophetic, but can be like manifestations of what's happening in our subconscious, whether we're stressed or whatever,
Sure.
all that kind of stuff. So I had a dream 2 nights ago. So not last night, but the night before.
Yeah.
And I was drowning in this dream.
Interesting.
It was very intense. Like I was that day we had talked about how my wife Annie did swim lessons. We were trying to teach Grace how to swim. I suspect that had something to do with it. I'm in the pool. I'm kind of like a kid. Annie was like the swim teacher, which is very interesting. But I'm like drowning, and I'm like flashing between like people calling her and being like, "Hey, Danny's drowning," and so and I'm like at the
cool.
bottom of the pool, like, "Oh my god!" So I'm drowning, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is like a manifestation of I'm stressed. Sometimes like you're driving the car and you're out of control. Like have you ever had those dreams?
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like those come when I'm out of control in life. I was like, maybe I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I'm about to go on vacation. All of that. So I'm like, oh, I wonder
Stay
if
away from the water on
Yeah.
vacation.
well, so I'm like, maybe it's that. So today I go to the gym and I'm talking to someone. I'm like, he tells us his dream. He's like, oh, what do you think it means? Anything? Are you guys people that think this kind of stuff? And so we're going through. I'm in the middle of my workout. And I was like, I had a pretty crazy dream last night that was me drowning, all that. And he's like, that's really interesting. My brother died drowning a year ago yesterday.
Whoa.
And so so my question to you is,
Are you this
I
guy's
guess,
brother?
I'm not his brother.
Okay.
But what do you think about that kind of, like, you both said you don't think dreams matter, but like, I thought that was an odd coincidence.
It is odd. Yeah. That
It is a coincidence.
Yeah.
I think.
No, like my dreams kind of like unironically piss me off. Like maybe I'm jealous that I don't know my dreams. Like the most I get a dream is like I have like that feeling when you're falling and you wake up. Like that's the most dream that I get. But like Elena every night is like, I had this ridiculous dream. We were 13 in middle school and all of these people that don't matter were there too. And this is this. And I'm like, you're taking 10 minutes of my life. I don't need to know this. And it's always just like the most random thing. She's like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, it's nonsense.
What do you think about that?
Like, and then she's like, well, you didn't give me the correct response. And I'm like, okay, probably. I understand. But like, it's just nonsense. Like, dreams don't affect me. Like, I don't know.
Do you think, so further though, do you think they're nonsense or you just don't like, they don't
Aren't
matter
willing
to
to
I
add
think
meaning.
I'm too heavy of a sleeper, like to have dreams. So like, they don't
Yeah.
carry
They
any
make
weight
teas for
to
that.
me. I do love a good tea. Shout out Tara Smith and Wordsmith
They
Teas.
do.
My friend Tara makes
They
great
make
tea.
teas for that.
We are not sponsored.
We are not
But-
yet,
Yeah.
Tara. Come on.
We're trying to be.
We need some ads. So, but
I don't know. I'm kind of maybe because I feel like the idea that your dreams are somehow a reflection of what's going on in your subconscious, or maybe even like your conscious life and the way you're feeling. I don't think that's super far of a stretch. I don't like this scenario you just played. I would just assign it to the coincidence category. I don't know that I would assign it
Yeah.
any meaning beyond that
It
for
doesn't-
myself. Not to say that people can't assign meaning to things differently.
It doesn't really give like Final Destination vibes, so I think you're okay.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a deeper meaning, but I was just like, I'm always interested in exploring coincidence
Yeah.
and potential to be more than coincidence. Now this one, like, so I will say, if it explored it, what was interesting is we had a really interesting conversation about death and grief and all that. So it opened up a really interesting conversation.
Sure.
I would also say I don't think God was like, hey, you're going to dream about this
Yeah.
the night before to then bring it up in CrossFit to talk about it.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
But maybe God did. I don't know. What does
maybe.
Google say, Sadie?
Google says that dreaming about drowning can symbolize emotional turmoil, repressed emotions, or feeling overwhelmed by responsibilities.
So let's go into this. Danny, what emotions are you suppressing today?
Yeah.
I'm not suppressing any emotions, but I am about to go on vacation at the end of this week as we record. And I am as exhausted as I've ever been professionally in the ministry. So I'm like ready to. So I feel very overwhelmed and
Sure.
like ready. I'm kind of at this point where I'm like very excited, like doing stuff like this. We've all kind of said before we started, this gives us a lot of energy. I have certain
Yes.
things through my week that give me energy. But I have been just grinding almost every day for like just stupid amounts of hours. And I'm just like ready to not. So I'd probably feel.
Yeah.
Obviously, I talked about swim stuff earlier that day, but I would be like, if I didn't have that conversation, I had already chalked it up to like, hey, this is your overwhelmed and stressed dream.
Yeah.
Well, you can dream about, a variety of things that can signify that you're, distressed or taking on too much. But like, who's to say that? I don't know. I'm sure that talking about swim lessons had an effect on your subconscious state, but I also think that like trying to find meaning is always good, and it's kind of the purpose of this whole existence bit.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was like, that's where I would go into this is like, I would say dreams and meaning aren't non-existent or dumb, but like trying to find meaning can be really helpful. Now I think we probably like over find meaning. I remember my mom had a really Pentecostal friend, and my mom got into that like for a while.
Love
And
that.
she was like, I had a dream. She's like, I had a dream that you're going to go be an evangelist in Ireland. And like this is, and you're gonna like convert, and like it's something
Top of the
to that
morning
effect.
to you.
And she like had this big, and like for like 10 years, for 10 years I was like, am I gonna move to Ireland?
Yeah.
And it's like that was assigning too much meaning to a
Yeah.
dream.
Sure.
Like wasn't real.
Yeah.
Well, no, meaning is just supposed to make you think. It's not supposed to prescribe you to do something.
Right. Yeah. That's The
That's a
meaning could be
difference.
like a thought experiment, not like a life path.
And I am gonna go this way because I have an interesting conversation with one of my friends. Like she, deconstructed, but is not in Christianity anymore. She's kind of like New Age spiritualist, but still in the prescriptive way. So like I like to do tarot with my friends. It's like something fun, but it's also similar to maybe the dream conversation. I think it's a way to provoke thought and meaning, not a prescription to where like, yeah, Danny, you should go to Ireland. So and I like kind of got a little bit into an argument with my said friend about this, and she's like, I want to ask you a question and then I want you to pull cards. I'm like, that's not how this works. Like I want to focus on an area and then like use the cards to prompt you to like think about something, not to tell you, not to prescribe you a 5, 6, 7, 8. This is what you should do.
I mean, I think like, yeah, like I think tarot's cool. Like I have friends that do that. I think the closest thing that I get to that though, like, is I like truly believe in like deja vu. Like that is like that. I think that's the closest I can get.
Dreams are complete bullshit, but you're like deja vu. Is my
Listen, I don't know what you want from me, but like I genuinely
It's because
I don't.
he experiences that. He doesn't experience dreams.
Yeah,
That's true. Yeah, I
True.
do not experience dreams. Period. Like I've worn my Apple Watch just like to sleep a couple of times, and like you're supposed to like live in like the REM sleep, and like that's where you're healthy. Like I am like dead to the world, and then it's like 4 a.m. I have to wake up to pee, and then like I'm back dead to the world. That's about it. Like that's about all I have. But like
so you die every night.
correct, and it's awesome. Like
good.
I sleep so great. But now with the kid like waking up to feed in the middle of the night, like
Oh my God, you're fine. You're fine.
I don't know what you want from me. But no, like deja vu, like I have those moments like once every 2 weeks, and like I really like feel like, oh, like I've lived this, or I've been this, or I've seen this. So maybe it is a dream that like I'm like recalling in life, or like maybe like I don't know. It's those weird things that like there's really no way to explain it. But like I fully lean into deja vu.
I just don't think that prescribing meaning has really ever been and obviously this is a blanket statement, so I'm hesitant to say words like ever, but rarely ever will I prescribe meaning to something that like, yeah, maybe it was a stretch, but like I don't think it was morally negative in any way, because again, I'm not like telling someone to move across the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. You know, but hey,
There are some people I would like to tell them to do that, but
that's true.
I am pro deja vu as well. I don't
Thank
know if you
you.
could be pro or against, but I'm like I have those moments where I'm like, this
Nope.
has happened, and I like.
Yeah.
Do you try to
vote
like?
in the comments? What you think about
Pro or
deja vu
anti?
and,
So when you have those moments, so what I like try to like ride the wave, so to speak. Like I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
try to like. There's this in your mind. You're like, I've done this. I've been here. Whatever it is, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how long can I stay in this moment?
I'm an overthinker about everything, so like I'll have that moment, and be
Doesn't
like,
sound like
I shut up. It's chronic. I'll like see a person like for saying like I know this person, like I've seen you somewhere, like I've been in this moment. Like I will like try to overthink like what is the moment where I've seen this person. I'll like try to like piece the puzzle together in my brain, and then I like go into like a downward spiral, which is really cool. But it's just that existential dread that we all live with. So
Yeah. Ever-present friend in time of need.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I think for what we're talking about today, like we're all texting. We don't have a theme necessarily, but I thought what we would stick with was what we did last time was just like throw out some banger questions and see where things go.
Just some bangers.
So does anyone have like a question to kick us off?
I can kind of like get us started. So, full spoiler. I actually got to hang out. I hung out with Danny last night. Met his wife for the first time. Super fun. Played some games. Great times. And Danny gave me
What
a
game did you play?
spoiler.
What game did
We
you
played
play with you?
Awkward Family Photos,
Oh.
which Danny showed his true age because he was like, "This isn't just a cool game. Like there used to be a website called Awkward Family Photos, like back in like the 1800s." And I was like, "That's so cool. Like way to live your childhood."
It was a moment in my life where I was like, oh, there's a generational gap. I was like,
Yeah.
like the website though, right? And
Yeah.
he's like, what?
My favorite though, while we were playing the game, like, and like all the pictures were like ones that he knew like from back in the day from that website. There's one of it's a maternity photo,
Yeah.
and it's a husband dunking the pregnant wife's belly like it's a basketball. And he said, unironically, my ex-wife wanted to do this picture like for our maternity picture for I think your first kid. And I was like, and the three of us were just sitting, we were just blank stares. We're like, how do we respond to this
Yeah.
question? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, she's a basketball player from Alabama. What more can you expect?
Oh yeah.
I love that. But anyway, so I got a spoiler alert to what Danny's question was, and it kind of got me to think. Like Sadie and I still young, JT and I less young, to put it nicely. But we all started ministry when we
What?
were. We are still younger. You and JT are not young.
Oh, okay.
Did I say that wrong?
You
You were
put
in it
yourself
twice.
in both categories.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that for me. I'm tired.
I was like, I guess I'm just dead to everybody.
Yeah, you are. Anyway, we all kind of got our start in ministry when we were probably
Tots.
way younger than we should have been, and given like
Yes.
large amounts of responsibility. So what has your experience been like growing up into what your role is now, like through your young age, and how do you continue to find yourself to like try to support younger people going through similar stories?
Well, as the elder in the room, I guess I can start this question.
Come on, Dad, bring it home.
So I believe I got my first job that moved me to St. Louis, which I think I was like very underqualified for by the privilege of like who I was and what I looked like. And like there were certain things that got me that job. And now I also would say like I worked really hard. And so like I don't think like privilege and hard work are mutually exclusive things. So it's like it led me through development, all of that kind of stuff. But I remember early on thinking like, man, I really wish people would give me an opportunity and would give me a chance. Like I wanted more of that kind of stuff when I was younger. And we were talking a little bit last night. I was like retrospectively looking back. It's like I remember sitting around a table when I was a youth pastor. I was 21 and like had like people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s around the table. And like I didn't know anything. And people really gave me the latitude to like fail and try things and like really trusted me. And so there was that side of things that I thought back. I've also, though, in the role I'm in now, like any opportunity when there's someone in their 20s or younger that wants to like fail or try something new, whether it's preach, whether it's start a new ministry, whether it's like just getting mentorship and support, even though I'm like still in what I would say like a young season of my ministry, like I feel obligated to give those platforms, especially to like people that aren't young white men, but also like if they are, like I want to give them that shot too. But I don't know, I very much feel like I benefited from some privilege, some hard work, and the mixture of those things together, and people just giving me the opportunity to fail. And I don't know, I feel like really obligated now to like give that space back to other people, because I think, and maybe you guys have experienced this in yours, like ministry, like I've definitely been in spaces where there was gatekeeping, and it was like there was this arbitrary, like, when you're 40 you'll be able to do stuff. But what is the reality is, like, you're always the same amount younger than the people that are older than you, right? You never catch up.
Yeah.
So that's a sliding scale. And so the people are like, well, I'm 40. When you're 30, you'll be able to do this. They're going to move it to when they're 50, it's 40. Like, the scale will always go. They don't release the reins. And so maybe that's what I'm trying to say is, like, I want to create space for other people to lead, but slowly phase myself out to release the reins and not think that, like, I'm supposed to be in charge forever, you know?
I have possibly the opposite experience of, I don't know if I felt any sort of agency until very recently. I don't know. I don't know if it's because I felt like I was kind of like filling a role, performing, if you will, to kind of bring it back. But of all of the times that I was a very young person, leading people either in small groups or teaching or in worship or being on a church staff, I don't know. I was just kind of like the eccentric one, and then the one with the problem beliefs. But I think just a lot of the time, no one really like asked me what I thought, I think. And I think I didn't know that I had any thoughts. It's kind of like a catch-22 in the way that it's like, in order to me to feel, to be more confident and to like exist in my calling or whatever language to put behind that, I like needed permission to first. And a lot of it is finding the right place and living more in alignment, is that I just start to trust my instincts and my intuition more and realize that, oh, I actually am like really cut out for this, for the jobs that I'm doing and for the things that I'm doing. And before I just felt like I was pretending for a really, really long time. So how that affects me now as a person who's leading others is I really just try and like ask what other people think, because I don't want to think for them. I want to hopefully inspire people or even challenge them to like look inward and be like, oh, what do I have a thought about this? Do I have an opinion or a stance? Like, because I think that is a lot of what, as progressive Christian leaders, is what we have to do. The work that is like working against us is like teaching people to trust themselves and teaching people that it's actually okay for them to find things out on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think of so when I first got started in ministry, I was in seminary and I was doing our like field education stuff, where we like our internships. And I interned in a United Methodist program where we were like part-time pastors in small churches in the area. And so they would put two seminarians per church in this program. And I mean, you guys were the pastors, right? I mean, like you weren't like an intern working under a senior pastor getting to experience all this stuff or whatever. You were the ones preaching. You were the ones showing up to the hospital. You were the one doing funerals and all this stuff. And so in 2020 hindsight, I think there were like problems with that, of like, I didn't have a seasoned pastor that I was able to like glean a lot of info from, because I was just like the guy doing everything, but I got a lot of good experience doing that stuff firsthand, which was really nice. But I think now taking that experience, like looking back on that and thinking like that experience gave me access and opportunity for experience, like firsthand experience, firsthand immersion in this work, access to, information about this type of work that I wouldn't necessarily have had otherwise. And so I think now, like we just took this group of youth to Washington, D.C. and got to experience firsthand, like going to the Capitol and talking to lawmakers and working with nonprofits and unhoused people. And I think that was really, really impactful for them, because it gave them access to and proximity to people and situations and populations that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I think like at this place in my ministry, both for like our younger folks that are coming up and are still kind of figuring out where they're at, as well as like our adults who may have been around for a long time but have not had an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations or whatever, giving spaces an opportunity to engage with knowledge in a certain way, to engage with different populations in a certain way, that they may not have before, I feel like is really where I'm starting to go in my ministry. Whereas the last couple of years has been a lot of like building infrastructure to do that at the church, and now I think there's going to be more opportunities on the horizon to do that more regularly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. How old was everybody when you got your first like full time, or like mine was part time, but like your first like official like ministry role, like not like an intern?
20. Well, because I was technically appointed as a pastor.
Right.
So like I was 23.
Sure. Yeah.
I got my first full time job at 25, which was like a lead pastor, which
Right.
is crazy thinking
insane.
like 6 years ago
Yeah.
that I had that. Yeah.
I'm still waiting to become full time.
Oh.
Well.
Well, when the podcast launches,
You can
You're
give
right.
online at
Yeah.
thewell636.com.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you put in the notes, you
Saving-
can put my name
Say
there.
no, yeah.
You can put my name in the notes.
this is great advertisements.
I did like an interim thing
Yeah.
one summer when I was 22, and that was full time.
Yeah, I was 21 in the first church I served at, and it was wild. I was still in seminary or still in undergrad, and I was moved to Alabama. I was doing 28 credits for my final semester and working, and it was like before online school was like a real thing.
Yeah.
And so I will say it was the dream online. It was just like a lot of book reading and paper writing, but it was wild. It was I lived in my office, slept on a futon.
Oh, yeah.
and it was pretty killer.
Uh-huh.
Love that.
Yeah, I was 21, like almost 22 when I started, and I came on as like the interim, same thing, and then like got moved into like part time, but that full time like role, and lost the title of that. And I was also a full time student doing that too. And like I think about those days, I'm stressed now.
Yeah.
How did I survive those early days? But it was I had this moment the other day. So on JT and I's podcast, the Progressive Pastor podcast,
Old podcast.
the
Old
old
podcast.
the old potty.
The old
The old stomping grounds. We had my former youth pastor who he works for the St. Louis Area Food Bank now, but when he was my youth pastor, when he was hired, we looked at him like I was a sophomore in high school, and I was like, this dude's like 40 years old, like what an old man. And then I realized I did the math the other day, and felt that existential dread. I was like, oh, Andrew was my exact age, like when he was hired at Fifi. And I was like, that's terrifying. But at the same time, like while that was like weird, and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting so old, like I might as well just like start digging the grave. I had like the comfort too. I was like, okay, like I've had these like 6 years of really cool experience and like learning how to do this. And like my biggest challenge in my first role in ministry was I started my home church. And so I was always just viewed as like 16-year-old Kyle. And so like when nobody would like respect me with my authority, like, and my decisions I would make, they would just be like, okay, Kyle, whatever. And I was like, well, this is annoying, but whatever. And so like when I came to Concord, I was like, oh, well, that's going to go away because nobody knows me from when I'm young. But I was like, I'm still 27 and we still have a lot of people way older than I am here that help make decisions. And they're like, you're still like the dumb young kid. Like, JT's only a few years older than me, but like I'm significantly younger, like on the staff significantly. And so it's interesting because it's still that battle, but at the same time, like it's that tension of why, like I feel like I will always stay in youth ministry. Like before I switched to ministry, I wanted to be a high school teacher. It's like I just have this passion of working for kids, and I feel like I will stay that way because like I love working with those kids and like doing what you guys did in DC and like allowing them to find a way to find their voice, not just in ministry, but then just in their lives and like take control of who they are. And like I love like this group that we have right now at Concord because like a lot of them are like freshmen, sophomores, and so it's gonna be really cool to like see them continue to find that like throughout their journey, like these next couple of years as they grow together. But like that's kind of like my way to like I have to like empower people and like part of the problem is there's not a lot of people in ministry younger than me. Like, I think Sadie is like 6 months younger than me, maybe
Yeah,
less.
maybe. What month are you born?
October 96.
I'm February 97.
Yeah, so not even. Yeah, like so like we're kind of like the bottom of the barrel most places, in more ways than none, obviously. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm looking forward to getting to this point. Like, my relationship with Andrew that I had, you know, I really get to see him like mentor me as I started on staff, and like I'm excited for that day. But like, I took for granted my first couple years in ministry because I realized like I can still do that now.
Yeah.
It's just with different people and they just look differently. Like, so it's interesting. But
I heard kind of a common thread throughout all of our stories, which I thought was almost really worth mentioning, is like, you know, talking about the difficult, specific struggles that a lot of us have had in ministry have a lot of the times become the specific thing that we're most passionate about, and likely what we're good about. Like, it's like me specifically, I have been treated horribly as a volunteer. So I like really extend compassion, and I like really want to make them feel like safe in the volunteer space. But I think like that is a really almost overarching theme that can be just true for everybody. And I think that for the people that listen to the Deconstruction Zone, that maybe that's like a version of that for them, because a lot of us, listener or people talking, like, we have been hurt.
Yeah.
We've had negative experiences, but it's like choosing to let kind of like the thing that hurt you also hopefully be the thing that brings healing. I think like that's the whole, that's prescribing meaning.
Yeah.
Well, I said like months ago when we and I recorded an episode together, but we had done this, I was preaching about this in terms of, I think, money, talking about our origin stories. But I do think like all of us have, whether it's in ministry or our faith or whatever, like whatever our origin story and introduction into that matters, right? So I talk about a lot, like one of the reasons I'm really, like I beat the drum of inclusion was I remember a friend of mine who is a trans woman that when we were growing up was kind of this like nerdy kid that was kind of on the outsides, and we were like best friends in youth group, but was like completely ostracized by everyone. And now like we understand that there was a lot more going on underneath the surface. But like I remember that friend of mine getting excluded and being like, I'm going to go sit with this person who's alone at that table, right? Like, and that was, and watching other Christians not do that, and that is like drastically informed for me, my ministry, and that was part of my origin story. And then like in leadership, like how I was treated, like you said, has impacted that. And so I think like for to your point, like anyone that's listening, it's like you may not work in a church, but I think like thinking about what your faith origin story is, like what was your first experience with other Christians? What was your experience as a volunteer? What was your experience with the Bible? Like your first experience, for better or for worse, will inform the rest of the journey forward. And I think in some spaces we're told that it needs to be a prescribed one size fits all, which I think is just not true. It's, I think knowing your origin story is so helpful to like predicting and kind of healthily navigating the journey that's ahead of you, and not pretending like what happened in the past didn't exist, but walking forward in the reality and implications of that.
Yeah. Because that's almost like why it's so important for everyone to, I mean, not to like overshare when you're first meeting a stranger, but like that is one of the extreme benefits I think of vulnerability, is because like all of the stories are so different that we're all just kind of reaching out, like relate to, like me to Kyle, relate to me to Danny, relate to me to Jade. Well, that's like when we're sharing something like that, really, that it feels like that's what we're at our core, that's what we're asking, like, please relate to me, I'm trying to relate to you.
And I think it's really important as we develop relationships with people in our churches, but also like introducing vulnerability into the pulpit, right? And like sharing about yourself and sharing about where you've been and, you know, what you've gone through in your life can be really radically freeing for some people, especially people that have like grew up with kind of this like Christian stereotype of like just everybody's happy, there's no problems, right? But being able to utilize whatever space you're in, if you're a lead pastor and you're preaching, or if you're an associate, or if you're in youth, or if you're in worship, whatever that looks like, to bring some level of vulnerability, because not only are people learning about you as a leader, but it's giving them permission to that this is a safe space to share what these things are about when they may not have had a safe space, especially in a church in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Good opening question.
Yeah, I mean, you gave
Banger.
us a banger. Yes.
Go team. Go team. Go team.
Yeah.
Love that.
Snap laws.
Anyone else got a banger?
Snap
I
laws?
mean, that's a hard one to follow, but
Thanks for tuning in to the Progressive Pastor
Yeah.
Podcast.
Yeah,
We'll see you
yeah.
next week. Yeah.
This is not the Progressive Pastor.
Oh yeah.
Podcast.
Oh dang! I
title.
gotta get it out of my head.
Okay.
I've got mine if
I
you guys
want
want
to know what yours is.
Yeah, do yours.
Ours kind of went hand in hand.
Yeah.
So.
And Sadie's
Hold
heard
hands.
mine before. Interdigitation.
waffle.
Waffle hand only. Pancake hand is for losers.
I had my first roommate. She grew up pastor's kid. Love her. She said that she was saving interlocking fingers for marriage.
That's so hot.
Yeah.
I would like to not go down this rabbit trail anymore and go into my question. So
We can also end this whenever you want. I will
Yeah,
do it
great.
the whole episode. Okay.
Exposure therapy.
I'm a physical touch guy.
Oh,
so
I
it
am
doesn't
too.
bother
Yeah.
me, But
we can.
but I don't need it right now.
That's
Um,
awkward.
Oh, great.
We can
So Sadie's heard me say this before. Kyle heard a little bit last night. It will mostly be new to you maybe, but I don't know that I've heard your guys' thoughts on this. But I remember back, I worked at a summer camp, I was a youth pastor and we took our people to summer camp, and it was a part of the Evangelical Covenant denomination, which had a kind of you choose theology on certain things. Like you could or could not baptize infants. Like your church might be like, we only do immersion for adults. We might do baby dedications or baby baptisms. Same thing went for women in ministry. Like they maybe had women pastors, or they would choose to accept or not accept that kind of thing. And the same thing was actually true up until recently.
Depending if they found them attractive or not.
Yeah, that might have been, who knows what the rationale was. But the same thing was true with the LGBTQ stuff. That was
Yeah.
actually the reason I left, was like made a firm stance on that. But I remember going to this camp, and I had a lot of friends that were in the same phase of life, like early 20s, and a few of them were women that wanted to go into pastoral ministry, but like were trying to figure that out. And they would make jokes about women in ministry, like, you know, like your place is in the kitchen, like that kind of thing, or like, you know, the pulpit's for a man. And I remember it being like early on, like I was like super a part of those jokes, whether it was about women in ministry or whatever. And then eventually I was like, do I have to stop contributing to these by making these jokes? Is by me joking about this normalizing a level of sexism by making the joke and the joke living there, right? And so if you're around me, you probably know that I very rarely make jokes, almost never, about women in ministry. It's like from that point of like committed, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your guys' takes on joking about hard things, and do you think the joke undermines the hard work you're doing, or do you think like, because I'm very pro, I like dark humor, so I'm like very pro dark humor. I think if we're not laughing at things, we're not growing. We have to find the humor in things.
Yeah.
But then there's this other side of it where I'm like, do we make this joke, and is by joking about it undoing the hard work we're trying to do? So I want to know your guys' thoughts on this.
I don't know, Joel. What do we think about that, bud?
I don't know why you would think I would have thoughts on this.
I don't know. Just the vibes.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, just the vibes. Well, if you've listened to the Progressive Pastor podcast,
Just the last episode of the Deconstruction Zone.
or that, that one
was enough.
We do make several jokes about. So here's what I think. Here's kind of my approach to the. I mean, I think audience is a huge, like, if you make a joke and you mean it, like last episode, like our last episode, I made a joke about how Kyle had never been on an episode with Sadie because Kyle believes Sadie shouldn't be on podcasts, right? Or women shouldn't be on podcasts, right? So, okay, there's a joke about women in ministry, but we know, one, it's coming from a place of a person who very much affirms women in ministry theologically and in our day-to-day work here at the church, as well as in the company of people who are affirming of this idea as well. So I think that makes it very, very different than if you were to make this joke to a room of complementarians or very conservative evangelicals or something.
And if someone doesn't know, explain complementarian, just for anyone listening that maybe doesn't know what that means, versus egalitarian.
Sure, yeah. The idea that that men and women are fundamentally different and complement one another in relationships or marriage, such as, you have this language in the Bible of, a man leading a wife, or a husband loving a wife, and a wife respecting a husband, right? So like these complementarian type ideas versus egalitarian of husband and wives equal on all footing and sharing, everything. So I think, audience, space, the person making the joke, I think all of those things make it very, very. Sorry, if you guys can't see,
I'm so into what you're doing with your microphone
here. I think all of that plays into what does and does not make a joke or humor meaningful or harmful. At least that's off the cuff.
Yeah.
Off the cuff.
The cuff. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I have thoughts.
Okay.
I've been typing. Sorry, that's why I had put my microphone in my front pocket.
Thank God you had that
in my frocket. Yeah. I can't.
On your frocket?
It's called a
front
frocket.
Pocket.
Yeah,
front
okay.
pocket.
Get with it. Come on.
Sorry.
Front pocket.
Okay.
Okay. I think there's a different. So I have this conversation with one of my. Oh, just kidding. You guys know Emily. I was like, one of my good friends, Emily. You all know her.
Unless
you
you're
know
new to
Emily.
the podcast, the
Unless
original
you're new to the
deconstructor.
Emily, in which case, welcome. Emily and I have the conversation a lot of like what's okay to joke about in comedy, because to an extent comedy is, and a lot of times we're talking about stand up, of course, but this is it's a microdose form of stand up, is gabbing with the pals.
Yep.
In a way, comedy is an art form that can also be like a coping mechanism for really difficult things. And I think it's not the worst coping mechanism. I think a lot of times it's best to make jokes on things that you like have experiences about, or to like punch down. Or no, just kidding.
Cut it, release that clip.
TikTok is going to blow up.
I think it's best to punch down.
Punch down. In conclusion,
Is that the episode title?
In conclusion, Matt Rife is my favorite comedian because he loves to punch down.
That guy does love to punch
He does love to punch
I'm
down.
sorry. Say that again. I was too. Who's your favorite comedian?
Matt Rife.
Okay, great.
No,
choice.
that's
Good jawline.
good. Ooh.
Bad jokes, good job, man.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I think that it's best to punch up and to not punch down when it comes to jokes. But if you remember maybe people won't remember this. It was like after a really hard like global catastrophe was that SNL was going to come out that Saturday night, and they had Pete Davidson do a cold open, and he simultaneously was like he talked about that he does have, like, his dad died in 9/11. He was a firefighter. And so he talked about like comedy being his pathway like through grief. And he talked about like, and so tonight, obviously prefacing the show, like that's what we're going to try and do. Like we're going to try and laugh, because like that's how we make it through whatever's going on.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Like, I am a massive stand-up comedy fan. Like, most podcasts I listen to are by stand-up comedians, and they continue that same vibe. And that's how I go through life. Like, I love any type of media. I'm just a big media file in that sense. Like, I like dramas and action things, but like when I need to just relax, like I will always revert to a comedy of some kind, and I will rewatch the same like stand-up specials on Netflix over and over and over again, and I will still belly laugh the same way that I did the first time that I watched it. And yeah, like it's definitely a vibe thing. Like my favorite Tom Segura joke is a joke that he makes in his newest special about a specific curse word that I feel like we should not say in the deconstruction zone. But then he's talking about this with a conversation with somebody that lives in his neighborhood in Texas, and and then he reveals that it's Ted Cruz, and and he's like consistently punches down on Ted Cruz, which so like for me, love that joke. Like it's great to make fun of Ted Cruz. So there are definitely moments that like I'm the same way. I live for dark humor. Like that's just kind of a good coping mechanism, I think I would say, for the stress and anxiety that I deal with in my everyday life. Like I use dark humor to kind of move through things. I think it's why like JT and I make a lot of the same jokes that we do about specific things, and an audience is huge. Like I know that like JT and I share this sense of humor. It didn't take us long in our friendship to like learn that we share this, and so we use that together. We also very quickly learned that we were using it in too many spaces, and we kind of had to scale it back in different places around the church and with like some instances in staff members. And that's why David was like, hey, you guys should start a podcast. And so that's how we got to this point. He was like, the staff,
get it out.
He was like, outlet for this. You have to stop saying stuff in staff meetings.
Yeah. The staff meeting table was not the place to go. And and that's why we're here. But yeah, it's this weird balance. Like there definitely are moments though still that like, I love my humor. Like my wife loves the same kind of humor. She'll like her way to respond though is like then she'll get real defensive at me, but like she does that to respond. Like she doesn't actually feel defensive about those things. But like then we hang out like with some friends, and then they're like, "Are you guys gonna get divorced?" And I'm like, "No, we promise we really love each other." So audience is huge. Like, and I'm not perfect at it. Like I definitely make a lot of mistakes many times a week of saying really horrible things around the wrong people. And I'm trying to get better at it. Like I'm aware that I'm not perfect at that. I think that we all can agree on that. That's also why the four of us vibe really well together. Like, our group text is my favorite. It's the three of us trying to get Danny to experience more dread in his life because he's too positive. But yeah, it's all a vibe. Yeah.
Well, speaking of dark humor, like the master of dark humor, right, is like Anthony Jeselnik.
Oh yeah, right?
And on one of his podcasts, that you guys probably have seen this clip. On one of his episodes, they were talking about like cancel culture and comedy or whatever, and he was like, "Comedy is getting away with it." So like, if you're getting canceled, you didn't get away with it. Yeah. Right. It's like, so knowing your audience, knowing like the context and all that stuff, it helps you get away with it. Yeah. Because if you don't know those things, or if you're not in touch with those things, then those things will be, are the one things that come back.
You sent me a Jeselnik TikTok yesterday, and I was like rolling on the ground.
I don't even know.
It was something about religion too. Which was really funny.
Yeah. Did I send that to you?
It was a banger.
I'll have to send it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm also an Anthony Jeselnik fan. He's like very interesting. Like what I find funny is like you would watch his comedy and be like, his audience is this group, and really, it's like it seems like he's pandering to a group, but his comedy is making fun of the people that don't believe that. You know what I mean? So it's like actually very smart. But here, so I want to workshop one real quick. So we're gonna workshop a joke.
Okay. Here we go. Okay.
You guys have all made, and I participated in. Okay. So we do know that Pride Month just ended. Yeah. And a common bit that this group made was, "Oh, come on, it's Pride Month. It's Pride Month. Like, are you being like JT? Give Danny a hug. It's Pride Month." Or like, we were hanging out with a mutual friend of ours who's gay. Like, give him a break. It's Pride Month.
It's Pride Month. Yeah.
So here's what I want to do: is I want to workshop this joke. That what do we think is anything problematic about that joke? Like, is making the joke inherently just funny, and is it punching up, punching down, or is there anything that is wrong with it? Because my fear sometimes with progressives, and I'm talking to myself, is that we can feel like because we're the ones progressing, that the things that we're not ready to release yet, we get to hold on to because we're progressing in all these other things. And so is this like, are these jokes, they could be objectively funny, but are they problematic? So that joke as an example. And this is an indictment on me as much as any of us, but I just want to have the conversation, because I think I hope this podcast does anything, it models that we're all progressing, right? Yeah. Like we're all progressing.
I have this really weird balance with things like that, like in terms of like, is it still okay to do X, while you're going down this progressive journey? And so like, as a progressive and a supporter of all LGBTQ rights, I love Chick-fil-A. And I still eat at Chick-fil-A like all the time. And my favorite is like we have like friends that are like how can you eat there and support them? And like my responses are
Everyone that works there is gay.
that's not my response, but also true.
Also true.
Like my responses are normally like my $10 chicken sandwich is not going to be the reason that Dan Christie goes under, but B, like I have a sister who is queer and a brother-in-law who's gay, and they love Chick-fil-A. So like I'm like that's like just like my kind of humoristic response of like if they're fine with it, then like it's fine. Like I'm allowed to do it, you know. And they say it's not a huge deal. Like whatever. Like so it's kind of like that defensive thing. Like so it's kind of the same thing. Like is that the right thing to do? I don't know. That's kind of where I revert to a lot of the time.
I don't want to answer that question, but I do have a friend that is very progressive, pro-LGBTQ, eats Chick-fil-A, but he refuses to call it Chick-fil-A. He calls it bigot chicken, and I think it's the funniest thing of all time.
That's pretty great, actually. Yeah.
Well, it's like this has nothing to do with the question, just picking up on the Chick-fil-A. Like all capitalism has homophobia built into it. Like Chick-fil-A is just kind of upfront about it.
Right.
Like at its roots, like Target has like homophobia.
Yeah, Home Depot.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's, so at least they're honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking like using this joke as an example of like it's Pride Month joke, like I could see how that could be used to like put somebody in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
Right? Like if somebody was, like maybe this is like a niche scenario, but like, if people are together at a party or whatever, and like somebody's really trying to like make a move on somebody else, and like they keep pulling this card, like it's Pride Month, like just kiss, whatever, like I could see that being
just
really,
kiss the homies.
like it's not gay to kiss the homies, right? Like I could see that being problematic, like if using it, and so that's again why like context, audience, the space, right? Like I think all of that is really important inherently. I don't know that there's anything inherent in that is problematic.
Yeah.
I think I'm open to being wrong about that,
That's what I was going to say.
but
Yeah.
I'm probably going to keep making the jokes.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things like, I'm aware that like any humor I make, whether it's, the joke about Pride Month or, women in ministry, whatever it is, like any joke that I can make, somebody can always be offended by it.
Yeah.
And I listen to comedians talk about this all the time. And like, well, if you're offended, then you just don't get it. And I'm like, okay, like maybe, but like at the same time too, like I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. And like, if I'm going to offend somebody and it's going to bother me with a joke, it's probably going to be something that I care about or like should care about, and I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong,
We're getting apologist a little bit with our like
it's okay.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know the way that you phrased the question. I just I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on this. I was going to say, what is our responsibility to not offend and hurt feelings? To even to go, like, I could go down this rabbit trail forever.
Yeah.
I'm happy to surrender the mic to anyone else's question, but I have been thinking about this for the better part of the last month and a half. And I'm like, this is the space I finally get to have this question.
This is it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the zone.
So this question you just asked, are you thinking about it specifically in the context of humor or just in general?
Well, so Kyle just like someone's always going to be offended by something, right?
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
I'll put it in my context. I feel a heavy and constant pressure as a pastoral figure to make sure people feel comfortable. And again, going back to my origin story, people being included, I carry very heavily the idea that anyone could be offended by anything. And like, that doesn't mean I try to water down or try to like say nothings and like be everything to everybody, but I like carry that. And I always ask myself, like, as a pastor, what is my responsibility to not offend? And you can make I talked about Micah a few weeks ago in church, like prophets' jobs are to push and be God's mouthpiece to people that is sometimes offensive. Like there's a case where like upsetting and offending might be a good thing.
Yeah.
But then, like, does humor fit into the prophetic, or does humor fit into, and this will sound more conservative evangelical to me, but is humor in justifying, like, hurting feelings a fleshly, sinful way to try to, like, justify hurting other people? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, being like, well, it's humor, so, like, it can, and we just have to figure that out.
Well, I think that the Old Testament prophets offending like the LGBTQ community are different, because one one is speaking truth to power, and people don't want to hear that. One is like there is a community that has been oppressed. So I think it's like
It's punching up versus punching down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you argue that making the joke about it Pride Month would be me as a straight guy punching down?
Yes, I could.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying
Right,
we
okay,
could
no,
argue
yeah,
that.
sorry.
I'm
I thought
saying
you
we
were
can't
saying
argue that.
I thought you were saying that
No.
joke is punching up. So that
No,
I think that joke
I
would
just
be
think I just think the offending. I just think that Micah offending his audience is not the same as an oppressed community being offended.
Yeah, I would argue that's what I was trying to say.
Oh,
too.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I wasn't trying to
Same
put
thought, different
I was
words.
saying like both offense, but one is up and one is down. That's kind of what I was saying.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like Micah, by all intents, is offending by, and it's not comedy, but
Yeah.
he is punching up because it's like I'm trying to push you guys towards something.
Yeah.
Right.
And like the question could be like, is me making a joke about women in ministry or the LGBTQ community or racial injustice that could be on the nose and funny, and like me, I'm actually an ally to these things, but my privilege to make the joke is me punching down and like using my privilege in a way that is funny but isn't mutually beneficial for the greater good.
Right. Is there a situation when that type of humor is beneficial for the greater good? I don't know.
I don't either.
I think that I usually try and let other people lead with any type of humor like that, especially if they are said group. So in my friendship, well, never mind. That doesn't work. I'm going to walk that back.
Cool story.
So did
Cool
you
story.
read? So did you read Witnessing Whiteness?
I've not.
So or no, White Fragility. Sorry.
Oh, white fragility. Yeah.
Yeah.
White fragility talks about, in terms of racism, like the white collective and protecting that. So you walk into a group, they make a joke about racism, like you laugh at it or you don't challenge it because your space as a part of the white collective is the most important to you, and you don't want to lose your seat at the table by saying like, hey, that's a racist joke. My question would be, in any terms of these things, are we protecting our collective as the privileged by making the joke and not pushing back about it?
Well, I hope maybe the tension is like asking that question and to keep asking it and like looking at it and asking others too.
And I think it all goes back to like the culture that you're in, the audience that you're with, like the setting that it's in, who all's around. Like, you know, you can make the joke of, you know, it's Pride Month, you know, so you know, whatever. And like I think you could do that to where the tone still could like be viewed as punching up. Like it has the context of punching down, but I think people can use that as a negative way to like really demean people. But like, you know, if I'm
like hold the door open.
Yeah,
it's Pride Month.
Exactly. If I'm like, Danny, just kiss JT because it's Pride Month. Like clearly, like we're like the four of us are all very close friends, and like I think that we're using that as a joke, and you know, and like it's calling it punching up is not. Gross, I know. It's not like calling it punching up. I don't think is the way that I would do it, but like I don't know. I think there's it. I always just go back to that. Like I think it's all about the setting. Like you know.
Yeah. So I appreciate. I'll let this land because I think we go for a while. But I appreciate you guys having this conversation. Like I hope none of you feel like indicted by it. But I would say like my hope was that
I'm offended.
we could have.
This will be my last episode. Of Deconstruction.
I think that the secret sauce is found in having like hard conversations. And again, like what I hope we model, like I don't know that like we all said very different things, and I think we could agree on different things, and push back. And it's one of the reasons I like to ask questions instead of answer them, is like I feel I have a lot of questions running in my mind, and I really value being a part of the conversations like these. And these are things I'm asking myself all the time, and so I'm like, can I get these out of my head and into the group space? And so I appreciate you having this with me.
Listener, I promise eventually we will get Danny to actually give some answers to some of these questions. Today is not the day though.
Could be. My question's done. I'll answer all of them moving forward.
What time are we at?
We're like 53. Like what do we vibe? What's the vibe?
I don't know. What's the vibe?
Yeah.
What are we feeling?
I think we go another. Does anyone have one more question? I mean, I would be interested to dive into one more. I think I've got the energy for it, unless you guys want to wrap it up.
Yeah. Let's do it.
We'll do one more.
All of the questions have been like practical ministry questions. I'm trying to think of one, like a practical ministry question to keep with the theme.
You're gonna
give us a left turn.
You're gonna scale back from being like the Princeton guy for a minute and try to not get super deep.
Hey, I took.
That's what needs to be right here.
Yeah, we can hang it right there.
Oh,
look at that,
guys! But then I won't be able to see it whenever I go to my office. And
When are you in your office?
give me my false sense of superiority to people.
You can take it with you.
I just carry it around.
But you can't take it with you.
Oh,
That's true.
Yeah.
Look at that. Well, maybe that's not a bad segue. So it's like, because we all started into ministry at different times and places in our lives, and so and there are lots of in the United Methodist Church, lots of really, really talented, called pastors who didn't do like the seminary thing, didn't do, so like, to what extent is, and maybe we'll do this too, it's like, to what extent is education, or should education, say, be necessary for pastoral leadership, and to what extent should education and, say, academic formation, maybe that's not the right term, be the responsibility of pastors for the people in the pews on Sunday? Kyle and I were just talking about this past week, about some of the stuff here at Concord and some of the gaps that I see that I want to start working on in the next year. Maybe that's a place to start. Another place to go is like, is that kind of formal education necessary for people in our position, or should it be, or should it not be?
I mean, I'll speak on behalf of, I am the only one here without a seminary degree. And, I've gone through my education journey, and I struggled a lot with education. Formal educational organizations like that are not where I thrive in types of learning. Like, I get very stressed out in a classroom, whether it's at home or in person. Like, it's not, I don't have any diagnosed learning disabilities, but like, I'm sure that I fit somewhere on there. I've just never gone down that path to actually diagnose it. But it's not where I feel the safest. But at the same time, like, I do love learning. I just learn in different avenues. But at the same time, like, with the education that I do have, I still feel very called to be a pastor. And I challenge myself every day to continue to learn something new, to continue to push forward, especially now that I've been in this last year in a more progressive setting and being at a Methodist church. Like, I'm kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of like Methodist theology, coming from the Baptist world. And like, I was leading confirmation this year for a group of 8th graders, and I had never led confirmation before. That's not a thing in the Baptist church. So I had to kind of like learn how to do that. And so it was this whole kind of journey. And, I tell myself every week I'm not going to boost JT's ego, and I hate myself that I do. But like, JT says a lot of like very smart things all the time. Like, he is very well educated. And to be honest, like, because we have a good friendship, I want to continue to like push myself to learn, so that way I know like what he's talking about. Because like, there are times that he is talking and I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. And I also don't want to say that because he's going to punch down on me and like ridiculously. Like, he is going to be like, you big stupid idiot. Like, how do you not know these things? Or his go-to line, it's like, big word, Google it. And I'm like, no. Okay, really cool. But yeah, so like I don't have my seminary degree. I'm planning on getting one someday. I don't really have much of a rush to get it right now because I'm very comfortable with where we're at in my life. Like, Elena just finished her master's. We just had a kid. So like, now is not really the time for me to go get my master's right now. I also don't really know what I want to get my master's in. Like, I probably don't want to do an MDiv. That's not really calling my name. So I want to get in something else. I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about all of that.
Yeah. And I will say, I make a lot of jokes about having gone to Princeton, and therefore I get a lot of jokes about having gone to Princeton. And I don't know if I said this on our podcast or this podcast or what. What am I doing? I'm stuck on something down here. Anyway,
You're doing great.
At some point, I realized I need to like examine that in myself about like why I make all these jokes. And feel like I arrived at was that like, if I make a joke out of this, people aren't going to take it seriously and they're not going to expect anything of me, right? Like, if I'm self-aware about being a douchebag, I'll somehow be less of a douchebag, but I'm not. Self-awareness doesn't absolve anybody of anything. But I will say, like, I found my seminary education to be very, very impactful for me and very life-giving. I love that kind of academic work. But I do not, and like, I think those of us that, with any level of education have probably encountered this at some point, that like, just because you have a degree or a few degrees or whatever, it doesn't like make you a better disciple, or like it. Like the running joke in seminary was like, we have these professors on staff who are like moral philosophers, and they're like the biggest pieces of shit, right? Like, it doesn't make you more ethical just because you like teach ethics, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea that, like I've known a lot of pastors that were not very good or not very effective pastors that had MDivs. And I've known a lot of pastors that didn't have that type of education who were amazing pastors. And I don't think one necessarily, even though you glean some kind of tools, some additional tools from that type of work, doesn't mean they can't be gleaned in other ways or for other ends. But
I think we're lucky to live in 2024 where a lot of information, like if you have a library card, you can learn a lot. Like you can get whichever book you need shipped to your nearest local library. Yeah. And for my experience, my undergrad was extremely formative. My seminary degree was a waste of money. And so it like, I do use it sometimes with some people in the comments, and they're like, have you ever read the Bible? And I'm like, yes, I have 3 degrees, like saying so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so like I use it when it suits me.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I think that we should all hopefully be striving and growing for there it is. Be striving to learn more just in general, but I don't think that it has to be one thing.
Yeah, I would. So I have various opinions on this. Yeah. So like I remember my first introduction to seminary. I was going to what is now Portland Seminary. It was called George Fox Seminary. I went to George Fox undergrad, and then I was like, I'm going to go to seminary. And I showed up to my first class, and I had an NIV Bible and got like laughed at by people. They're like, you idiot. Like, why would you bring that to a seminary class? We all read the NRSV or whatever, right? And so I remember like having like a very like insecure moment in that regard, and also like looking at the people now I know that have graduated. I was like, to your point, it's like, are they any more effective pastors? Are they any like intellectually more knowledgeable, like any of this sort of stuff? And so I had a level of insecurity initially going into it. I just preached maybe a month ago, and it wasn't about this, but I had talked about how like seminary is, I called it the cemetery, right? Like you've heard that joke in seminary, right? Like this is where your spiritual life goes to die in some ways. And someone came up to me afterwards, and they kind of gleaned from my part of my sermon, like seminary is maybe not as important, right? And they're like, well, I think it is really important. Like we want to know, what you're talking about up there. Right. And like we really appreciate you having that, because we've been in churches where the pastor maybe doesn't have a seminary degree. So I would say a couple things. One, it is a privilege to incur $100,000 of debt to go to seminary. And I think that the structure and system we have is not one that is biblically based. And I think that there are really interesting ways and wonderful ways to educate and train pastors that doesn't put them in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Like I think every church should have like a leadership development pipeline, and like doing seminary for free for anyone that wants to that. And whether they go into the greater system or they just serve in your context, like I think they should be pastors. I think the Methodist Church gatekeeps the word pastor. And like in our context, they would not call Sadie a pastor. It's one of the reasons we call her a pastor, because she does pastoral work. And like, I don't think it's up to someone else to be able to call her that or not call her that. And I think maybe you guys struggle with the same thing. You guys are in a Methodist church, right, as well. So
big director energy over here.
Big,
and I think that's so. I think that's very silly to me. And like, I remember when I applied to work at the church I moved to St. Louis for, I was in seminary at Fuller, not done yet. And I said, I'm only applying for jobs that will call me a pastor because I am called to be a pastor. And so I applied for a job that was college age ministry director / bar church pastor. And so it had pastor in the title. I was like, I'll do it. But it's like, and so some of that was hubris on my side. Right. So it's like, I felt entitled to be able to be called something. But on the other side of it, I was like, this is what my calling is, and whose say is it to gatekeep this from me, right? And I think, so I don't know. I think the answer to the actual question that you asked is I don't actually think it's that necessary in terms of the structure we've built up that is a capitalistic structure that you said, all of which are homophobic earlier. But I would also say that like we should be educating people with seminary level educations, because there's people like you, JT, that are about to have your doctorate, people like me that have my MDiv, and so many educated people out there that part of our job as pastors, and Sadie that has her master's. Sorry, I wasn't leaving you out. Sorry, but it's like they're educated pastors.
No, we're just leaving Kyle out.
That
Kyle with his
should
bachelor's.
that should
I hate myself. It's
be
fine.
educating the generations lower than them, and we're not doing our duty as pastors by not educating and pouring into. And to your point, like making us disciples, like to be a good disciple, you make other disciples. That's what we should be using our education for.
Yeah.
And I really struggle. This is part of the conversation Kyle and I were having, is that like I think pastors, a lot of pastors that are very knowledgeable and very well educated, they will preach sermons and they'll lead small groups and they'll have conversations, but they never really try to teach their people about theology or about the Bible. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people, someone's starting a sermon series on one of Paul's letters that's contested, and like they don't share that with their congregation. Like they don't tell their congregation what they know about the Bible or what they know.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
Yeah, like like that really, really bothers me. And like we're doing our congregations a disservice by assuming that their faith is so fragile, or by assuming that they're so stupid that they can't process the stuff that we processed in seminary.
Yeah.
And that really bothered, like we're looking at, like the virgin birth story, and it's like, okay, this text from Isaiah was translated this way, and it translated virgin instead of young girl. Like, how does that impact our doctrine that we've really built this entire thing around? And I don't like that assumption. I like assuming that my congregation is strong enough and smart enough to be able to deal with this.
Yeah. Well, and it gives off this air too of like pastors that do that. Like it gives off this air of like, well, you're not worthy to know this knowledge. Like I'm higher than you. I'm the one standing on the pulpit. Like I'm the one.
It's giving
right?
Gnosticism.
Is it not big word?
Big
Google
word.
it.
Google it.
Google it. I hate that I said that. I will. Yeah. But like it's it. Why are we not giving?
Might want to.
Why are we not giving better access to our people? Like they we are lucky to have this knowledge and we were lucky to go through these classes to learn these things. Like, but what good does it do if we don't share it? Like, it's like a doctor going to medical school and being like, I know how to cure, this disease. Period.
That's
like
it.
End of story. Like, yeah, bye.
Well, and there's like this aspect of moral formation in that I think is really important when we look at like the information a lot of these people are getting about certain subjects or topics. Like I think about this a lot when I teach like world religion to undergrads. It's like a lot of them grew up in families where their only interaction with Islam was like through their parents' Fox News thing, so like teaching about other Christian denominations, teaching about other religions, teaching about the history of Christianity in America and the way it was used to oppress people. Like, I think there's, a moral imperative on us to teach in that way and not just like, give watered down, feel good sermons or whatever that are overly spiritualized. Yeah.
The irony, because people think that all progressive Christianity is watered down, non-truth spirituality.
Yeah.
That's most of your TikTok comments.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue, and anyone that's heard me say, like, I think you have to do a harder level of research and wrestling to be on the progressive side, because you're not just taking it at face value. You're like doing what biblical characters did, and rabbis and early Christian leaders through time has like wrestled with it. And like we have this idea, and I said this kind of in passing in my sermon, and maybe could have done a better job like unpacking it. But like certain things we agree like weren't actually held as strong beliefs, like this tension between faith and science, or like inerrancy, and like this kind of stuff. Like these are newly held things that we've said are centuries old beliefs. Yeah, and like that was part of the work that I tried to do in my sermon last Sunday, was like just dispel some of the rumors of things that have existed forever. Yeah. And like one thing that really has existed for the majority of time and is starting to go away is wrestling. and like we're acting like certainty is the new norm, and it's like actually uncertainty in wrestling has always kind of been the norm, and like a faith that guided that. That's why faith was so strong, I think, for early Christians, was like uncertainty was the name of the game.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about like, you know, we talk a lot about Jesus in the church, right? We talk about a lot about how Jesus was both God and human, right? And this weird, but that kind of formula wasn't settled until the 300s and 400s. So like, you're telling me that there were 300 or 400 years of people before that who weren't really Christians because they didn't know this, they didn't like believe the specific formula. And so there's a lot of that, or like the way the Bible was constructed, and like how that the Bible didn't come down and like float down from heaven, right? Like
Yeah, or
this
what
was
happened before
constructed.
people were Calvinists? Like they just didn't know the right way, right?
Yeah. They weren't properly predestined, I guess. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't worry, it was all a part of God's plan.
God's plan.
That transition sucked so bad.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I feel like.
Now what's gonna be playing in the background
It
when
caught
we edit
me.
this?
Yeah.
Do you have a final question for us, or do you want to land this plane, as it were?
I personally don't. I was mostly just hoping to get some sermon help for this Sunday.
How'd that go?
Might be our next episode.
No,
Yeah.
this coming Sunday.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that'll be our next episode. It's
Just rip me to
sermon
shreds.
resource
Ooh,
for,
yeah.
Oh.
Sadie.
Yeah. We can
Well,
do
good.
that.
Big
Well, cool.
guy.
Kyle, you want to send us out?
Yeah. Thanks again for joining us, guys. Make sure you check us out on all of our socials, and remember to embrace the journey. Sick.